So, Pete, this hasn't been a raid. This is a recruiting exercise for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this is part 2 of the series I'm doing on whether there is such a thing that you can test and measure in your own day-to-day experience of whether there is such an event as an elevation in people's consciousness, so the people you are dependent upon for your well-being, whether you can tell they're starting to evolve and see truth as it really is, not the self-deceits that they're still holding within, because the narrative that's been pushed now in the so-called freedom movement, or has been pushed for a while actually, is that there's a planetary alignment shift, and that means that that's now raising the vibration of human consciousness. So first I'm going to play you the narrative I'm talking about, and then I'm going to come back and then I'm going to test that against what is actually there in the so-called freedom movement and the consciousness of the people who push the narrative that they want freedom for all.
But what's happening that's so beautiful is that the consciousness that's coming in now is so different than what was prior to it. It's allowing for a kind of opening and a heart-centered awareness that we didn't have before, much higher vibrational level. So we are now all throughout this cosmos. We're all being bathed in it. Those old systems of control, top-down, hidden, manipulative for their own gain, those types of structures and entities cannot last in this new energy. This isn't their energy.
Okay, so now that you're refreshed on the narrative, before I go ahead, I'm just going to plant this flag. What if this is a more sophisticated version of the Trust the Plan Q White Hats, one that's been circulating that so many people have fallen for, that's there to trap the ones that didn't fall for that? Because instead of being a divine plan by humans, there's benevolent humans that work within the structures, now it's like set in the cosmic forces. So what a wonderful, seductive thing to fall for. Just going to plant that flag, and now I'm going to show you the difference between the narrative you just heard and what's actually happening in human consciousness amongst the so-called freedom movement.
That we know what we're talking about with our work that's in there as well. So, let them give it to their legal team, because they better get their defence ready, because we're coming for them.
So, Pete, this hasn't been a raid. This is a recruiting exercise for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty well. And surprisingly enough, what happened to us, because as soon as I talk to police now, within 1 or 2 minutes, I know if they're Freemasons or not. So what happened is, once they secured the place and they had us standing out the front, they didn't handcuff us or anything. They arrested one fella, but then let him go later on some Queensland warrant. But anyhow, when we were out the front, as soon as I started hearing them talking, I said to one of them, "Oh, have you got the Freemason oath?" And the guy still looks at me and goes, "No way." And so I spoke about the oath, heal, conceal, never reveal.
You've got it in the document now, the full oath.
Or I have my tongue torn out by the root, my throat cut, like it's a terrorist oath. And he goes, "No way, I wouldn't say that." And then I was just observing them all, and then I noticed the other guy was a real smart ass, and I said something to him, and I said, "Have you got the oath?" And straight away just looked away like that, wouldn't answer, because under their oath, they have to tell the truth. Or they have to tell the truth and say that they are, but he just refused to answer it. And I said, yeah, you're a Mason. You're a Mason. I can see your aura straight away. And then I started wandering my eyes around the other ones, and I said to one of them, I had a wrong opinion of you. Seeing your aura was a little bit mixed up, but I realised now you're not a Mason. I was a bit confused. And then I went over to the other and I said, "What about you? Are you a Mason?" And he did the same thing.
He said, I can't answer that. Or he said something. One of them said they won't answer.
Anyway,
I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to go into that. That's what they said.
We're not going into that.
Yeah, not going into that.
Okay, so if you haven't spotted the underlying current that's running thick through what you just saw then, and what you're going to see and has been in play in this entire calamity called the freedom movement since the dawn of time, because that's why there isn't any freedom. Yet it's still a thing that we're calling a freedom movement that hasn't moved anywhere. And that is the performance of being powerful, when in actual fact, there's only powerlessness. And it's so concealed, right, that people are willing to do it in front of an audience because the audience cheers it on. So people who come to these channels to watch these so-called heroes are all joining into the lie. That's what we call evolution of consciousness. If you're a freedom so-called fighter, is to lie to yourself so deeply that you don't even recognize that you're doing it out in public anymore, because the public's joining in with you. The one who watches you is joining into the lie. So we're fueling that same lie, and the masters are laughing their asses off at us because we're doing it to ourselves. And when I say we, I mean the people who actually have the gall to put their face on camera and do it like that's some heroic act. Sit with that for a second. Because if you really sit with what it means to be terrorized and to be paralyzed by terror, because there's people that we grew up with, that were our neighbors, our friends, or our family, that chose to willingly be a uniformed terrorizer, they're willing to keep doing this to their fellow man because they're cowards who are emboldened by the fact that they're giving a free pass to do the unconscionable. And until there's courage to face that lie, that internal lie, that you don't have any power while you pretend that you do, they're going to keep doing it. That's where it all starts, is to own up to the fact that lying to yourself, self-deceit, contradiction is why this structure of organized violence and terrorizing and dehumanizing, and you add whatever other adjective you want to that list, is still in play today. It all starts at the individual level of self-deceit and then joining in with others who want to keep that charade alive. So show me where that shift in consciousness is going to appear, no matter how many planets align, no matter how many claims there are that there's a shift in energies that can't support this, criminal structure anymore, that there's no place for it. How's that going to happen if the individual isn't going to shift from within? And then answer this. What about when the energies weren't favorable for that? How do you explain the people that in the small numbers had the courage to call out the truth? How do you explain that? Right? So none of this makes any sense. Yet people still swallow it up because you know why? Because it means they don't got to take responsibility for their own actions. It's going to be done for them in some mythical place. That's the tragedy, right? Now, I want you to think about what you saw when you saw those red flags. Did you spot why those red flags came up? It's a thing I'm playing with just to see if it's going to have any value. So this is the first time for me. But that's what I'm about to do, is go through each and every one of those flags, just so you can see the level of self-deceit if you haven't already spotted it. So flag number 1, it's when she says, get your legal team together because we're coming for you. So to understand how that was a performance, you first need to know what the actual legal system really is, right? So let's have a look, shall we? When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. That's the first quote I've got from Frederick Bastiat. Second one, justice is a fairy tale told to keep the victims docile while they are being robbed. The legal system is merely a heavily armed corporate cartel designed to violently protect the hoarded assets of the ruling class. Now, if you've done your research on who Frederick Bastiat is, this is a guy in France that was working within the entire governmental structure, who saw what it really was, and he actually wrote about it, right? And this was hundreds of years ago. So this whole idea that corporations are something new, no, very old. It's been a massive takeover for hundreds and hundreds of years. Okay, just to give more weight to understanding, hopefully on a deeper level, what the legal system really is, I'm going to now include some real life examples of the depth of depravity of what the people who uphold this structure do to their fellow human beings. So example 1, forced parental abandonment. That's the point of what the Child Protection Agency is about. That's their role. The legal system is what holds all that together. They have things like that family violence legislation, right? So what does that do? It allows thugs of the state to come into your home and extract you out from your sacred space and terrorize your children that they will never ever recover from. And nothing happens to these people who do it. They are seen as heroes. So what they're doing is they're making sure your children are subject to forced parental abandonment. So the child, it doesn't have this distinction between why you're not there anymore. The child just knows you're not there. And that's a pretty severe trauma wound that is going to stay with that child and most likely increase the likelihood of them being dysfunctional in their relationships. So what they're doing is they're creating future crime by getting in early. That's how sinister and wicked that system is. Now let's look at another example. What about anything where there is no actual victim, but it's a breach of legislation? How many people are in those concrete cells, those dumpsters, because they've breached legislation, but there is no actual crime because there's no victim? That's what's going to happen. Again, more harvesting of your life force energy, because now what are they getting? They're getting cheap labor. And then also people are forced to pay for it by the extortion of tax. So you think how sick that is. That's all part of the legal system. Let's look at another example. What happens if you actually go directly against the protected people within that entire legal structure? If you try and take them to task within their own system, you end up being a Desi Freeman. So this is how sanctioned murder happens. That's all allowed if you're one of the made men in that secret society that runs it. That's essentially what the legal system is. It's pretty much the superstition of a secret society that's imposed on the entire population without them even realizing what they're actually party to. People who run this don't care about the cost to you personally because their attachment is to their own delusion of being powerful. Like I said, this is a game of charades. Even the people who are running it are deluding themselves that they're powerful when they're really not, because all they are is forceful. It's got nothing to do with power. The two are not the same thing. They're people who are willing to be part of the initiation of force to get innocent people to comply to their will. That's what the legal system is. It just conceals it under this very formalized structure that gives the appearance of there's something legitimate happening, because it's not just random ad hoc, whatever we want, even though most of the times it is. Yet there's still some kind of, well, we've got to listen to this case now. You've got to put your hand on the Bible here. You know, you've got to say some words. got to be sworn in, now I've got to go look at precedent, all this kabuki theatre to bamboozle the innocent, to make it believe like something legitimate must be going on here, even if my conscience knows there's something really sick happening at the same time. It's a way to get you to silence your conscience. That's the point of the legal system. Because if the mind was able to see the truth, they'd be getting chased away with pitchforks and they'd be getting burnt at the stake, these people. And they know that. So they need to make sure there's some kind of cover that keeps that at bay. So why would you even ever say that you're going to use that system? Like, if you really, really understand what it really is. It's one of the most sinister, cunning, devised ways to dominate and control perception so you remain docile. Now I'm doing flags 2 and 3 together because those two party fouls happened within seconds of each other and it was done by the same individual, and that happened to be the host. So what he says at the beginning is something about, it sounds like this was a recruiting exercise for you, and he says that to the male whistleblower. All right, so what's happened there? He's joined into this and started fanning and fueling this self-congratulatory energy about recruiting cowards. That's something you want to congratulate people for, is it? Like, the only time these people have this courage is when it's fake, when they put on this costume, because they know in that costume they are sanctioned to do the unconscionable and nothing will happen to them. They couldn't get away with it in their civilian clothes, and they know that. So you've got people who are schizophrenic, who have two ways of behaving, right? Go have a look at them without their costumes. See how meek they are in reality without that costume. And you want to recruit that kind of individual? What for? What could they possibly contribute when they've got split personalities? That's going to be in the service of freedom. Like, just wow. And then he puts up a message from the chat on the screen, and it's something about, come on, One Nation, let's fix this. Like, seriously, the individual who's part of this audience of self-deceivers has just exposed just how much they deceive themselves, because now they've done the collectivist thing and joined in like they're now part of the solution by choosing a kind of master that's going to fix all their problems for them, because they don't know how to do it themselves, like an infant. So they need mummy and daddy to come in and do it for them.
The rule makers tell the cops what they think is wrong and what they think is right. They assign punishments to what they think is wrong, and they codify it into what they call laws. But they're not laws at all. They're simply the opinions of politicians designed to remove freedoms and extract revenue from the tax cattle under the guise of public safety and social advancement.
So if people were genuinely honest, the ones who claim to be freedom fighters, what you would hear come out of their mouths, I'm willing to bet whatever you like, is that what they really have been fighting for is to go back in time and have the lives they were living prior to 2020, when the whole COVID thing came out. That's sadly what defines the majority of people who've joined this idea that they're pro-freedom. They just want that comfort back, that illusory comfort, where they'll still getting violated. There was no change there, but it just wasn't as extreme. So they got to the point where they were comfortable with that level of violation. That's what freedom is. Can you imagine? So now I'm going to finish off with flags 4 and 5. There's a 6th one as well, but I'll just bundle them all together. And that's now by the male whistleblower, when he says, after he's been encouraged, of course, because he's done such a wonderful job recruiting cowards, that he knows when he speaks with police, he knows within minutes whether they're a Freemason or not. And then he goes and says, you're a Mason, I can see it. I can see it in your aura, right? Like, now he's got some superpower, but then his superpower falls off the cliff all of a sudden, and he comes and says something about, Oh, I had a wrong opinion of you. I had your aura all mixed up, but now I can see you're not a Mason. Like, perfect confusion, right? So this guy's all over the shop. But leave that aside. The real issue is, why focus on a gang of criminals in costume and then try and split them into good and bad? Like, what's got to happen to you to do that? Because if you're focused on whether someone's a Freemason and that makes him bad, and someone who's not, who's doing the same job of violating you just as wickedly as the one who is or isn't, and then you're splitting them, something's not gelling in your understanding of reality. Because it's the conduct that matters, not what affiliation people have. It's their conduct. That's all that matters, is, are they violating your right or are they not? That is sacred, because there can't be such a thing as a good violator. That's like saying you can have a kind master, because you don't own yourself in that moment. So how is that a good thing? Anyone who conducts that behavior against you, how can that be something welcome that's going to fulfill you? So why split them into categories when they're doing the same job? They're waiting for the same orders from the same master, affiliated or not, and they'll conduct it just as viciously. Talk about confusion, right? So the other thing is, when you focus on whether someone's a Freemason or not, and you have a look how many people are so hell-bent on that call themselves freedom fighters, you actually lose your power, because what you're doing is you're now giving up your capacity to respond to what other people do, as opposed to focusing on what they do and that they're bad people. Then you have no power, because you don't know how to speak to the violation of the individual who's following the order. I've done it, right? And I've seen the look in their eyes of these criminals, right? Where I've said to them, and I've seen the panic show up immediately, who bears the greater burden of responsibility? The one giving the order, or the one following it and carrying it out? Oh my goodness, you should see what happens next. There is like so much justification or obfuscation. You're going to get one or the other or both. It's insane. So you speak straight to their conscience. That's your power. It's that simple, right? And if they are, and you're scared, right, which you would be, which is just natural, and you own up to it, well, that's how you use your power, is to speak directly to what it is they're violating. Now, if they're going to do that, that means there's a conscience that knows that that's true, yet the ego doesn't want to face it. So it actively goes into denial, obfuscation, and justification, right, to give itself some mental soothing. Yet, if that conscience wasn't there, none of them would have PTSD. And PTSD is rife amongst the police, just as it is with the military. Why is that? Why is PTSD rife amongst them, but not so much amongst politicians? The other thing I want to say about PTSD is that once you decide that you're going to do the unconscionable and seek to impose your will over other people by force, there is an immediate consequence to your self-worth and your self-respect. And that is that it starts to erode. And the more it erodes, there's a bigger increase in self-hatred within you. And then what that does is it actually gets projected into your victims in order for you, the violator, to be able to cope with what you're doing. So that hatred that you have for yourself, you turn on and put it into your victim and hate them. So what you're really doing is you're beating all the things you hate in yourself. You're trying to beat that out of you by beating it into the victim. And all that does is it just keeps repeating that cycle the more you keep conducting it. So eventually, you get to a critical mass where the reckoning is something that's constantly tapping on your shoulder. It's time for a moral reckoning. The tragic part is that if there isn't an intervention, they'll keep doing it, and eventually they won't be able to handle it, these police, and that some of them will suicide. So really, what you're really doing is, when you do this intervention, is you're actually helping them do that which they will never initiate on their own, but what their conscience knows needs to happen. I wonder how many people have seen it that way. Let's have a look at how it goes down when you speak direct to conscience and you don't split them into categories. They're just either a violator of your rights or they're not.
I don't ask the question.
With me, it's best you don't, because I tear you pigs apart. You know who I am. Razuga, listen, I'm being honest with you. From man to man, you ruined our country. You followed policies and procedures that have made America a total police state. And it's only getting worse and worse because of you. When do you get your pension? You just waiting for your money? I'm serious, dude. You think you've done a good job here? You think the citizens aren't waking up and going, man, these guys suck. These guys suck. Your goal is to pull somebody over here, arrest them, steal their car, and take their money. That's your goal. You are the enemy of the people. You are the enemy of freedom. I'm dead serious, bro. You are. Everybody knows it. Everybody right now. Put a 1 in the chat right now if this jackboot thug pig is the enemy of freedom. Sooner or later, you got to face the reality of what you've done. You've ruined this country by following BS jackboot thugs policies and procedures, and you know it. You know it. The jails are packed and the streets have never been worse. It's never been worse, has it? Is it funny to you that the country's ruined? Is it good? You like this? You think this is kosher? You think this is cool? I just like to let you guys know right to your face, eye to eye, man to man. You're the reason why America sucks. You are the fear, you are the darkness, you are the enemy of the people.
Okay, how did that land for you when you heard you are the fear, you are the darkness, you are the enemy of the people, you're the reason why this country sucks? Didn't say anything about politicians and that the police are just doing their job, because they're good people trying to make a living, doing the best they can. He never said that. He went straight to the source, the ones who commit the harm. Didn't make a distinction amongst there'd be some good people in amongst there, and there's some baddies. There's always some bad eggs everywhere. He didn't do any of that. Versus to the whistleblower saying, "Oh yeah, when I speak to police now within minutes, I can tell if they're a Freemason or not. I can see it in their aura." And then he goes and interviews them, right? And then tries to recruit the good ones, like there is such a thing as a good criminal, one who's willing to violate your rights upon command. And if you really sit with it, can a politician actually be directly responsible for that kabuki theatre that they enact, actually committing crimes? Because does the legislation that they sign off on, does that just walk off the page and then physically start harming people, start assaulting them, start trespassing on their property, start caging them, beating them? Does the legislation do that? Or is it the individual that wears the police costume that does that? So the politicians are responsible for the deception, the manipulation, and that's a crime in its own. But the actual conduct, they're not. And it's the conduct that counts the most. Because without the conduct, there is no actual change in reality in the physical world. The conduct is required to change the physical reality. So here's one way to look at it. Do you, as a police officer, do you put on the costume, or does the costume put you on? Think about that. Because no uniform, no amount of weapons can extinguish the blade that cuts through that egoic defense. And the more people that speak like that, the quicker these cowards will collapse and they'll cease doing what they're doing.
If the problem with the world is that there are evil people who want to harm us, then the last thing we would want to do is give those evil people a uniform, a badge, a gun, and the authority of the state.
So the term law enforcement that's attached to police officers, policy officers, is an outright lie, because anything to do with law must be directly related to the underlying moral order that exists independently of human preference. So they don't do that. They actually enforce the whims of criminals in suits that have usurped the rule-making capacity that's endowed to the legislature and used it as a way to convince the masses that they have a right to dictate how the masses should live. That's what the job of a policy enforcer is. So anyone who says that they are law enforcement is actually telling an outright lie. So this has gone longer than I was hoping it would take. So I'm going to end it here. Just before I do, I just want to direct you here to the magnacarta1215.com website, to the articles section. So when you click on the articles tab, you drop down and then you'll see this heading, Society Founded on Natural Law and Moral Autonomy. So I'm pointing you to this because what I've identified as one of the reasons as to why the majority of people who call themselves freedom fighters keep falling for the orchestrated traps that they believe are not, but they actually are, and they can't spot them, is because they don't have a vision of what living freely in voluntary cooperation with your neighbours, etc., would look like. So if you don't have that, it's going to be very easy to fall for what you already know. So that's why I'm recommending reading this. So as you can see, it talks about Magna Carta, obviously. There's something really critical to understand about what that really means, those articles of common law. So this will help you understand that. Just going to read through some of the headings. So who stands to lose if the truth of reality is remembered? So then you've got the next one, the 5 core shifts from coercion, which is the way we've always known how to live since you were born. And before that, your parents, their parents, etc. It's been like that for generations. So shifting from that to moral order. And then there's 5 points that's broken down into, from policy to conscience-led agreements, from enforcement to restorative accountability, from representation to direct moral responsibility, from monopoly on force to voluntary participation, and clause 61, and the sacred right of withdrawal. So the basic principle of freedom is your right to choose and also your right to refuse. So there's a formalized way that can happen that's already in play today, but because no one knows about it, or very few, then if you do speak up, you're treated as a conspiracy theorist. So we need more and more people to understand this. And then you've got some critical reading that it can take you to really expand your knowledge base. And then you can understand why you in the past have been falling for traps and how cleverly they've been set up for you to do that and look like they're organic, movements, but they're actually not. And then even more importantly, how you can direct your action so that you are a contributor to the freedom for all.